Remembrance Day means remembering what is more Canadian than our men and women who went to war.
Remembrance Day is a very important day to me. It lets you understand the sheer magnitude of the number of troops we lost.
World War I, 60,000 plus. World War II, more than 42,000. In the Cold War period, another couple thousand people have died. I have to think too about those that we have lost and continue to lose on an almost daily basis because of age.
First casualty that I see, their aircraft was just ahead of ours. All of a sudden, this aircraft exploded. I don't think they found any parts of it. I'm very thankful that I came back.
When we take that moment at 11 o'clock for 2 minutes of silence, when everything is so quiet, and it does give us the opportunity to really think about the sacrifices that people have made.
I hope Canadians understand that peace and freedom comes at a heavy cost.
Are you a hero?
No, far from that. No. We tried to do what we could.
No, not a hero, not me. I did the job I was sent there to do, and for 30 years, I did it as well as I could do it. And was me.
That is a live shot of the National War Memorial here in downtown Ottawa, the nation's capital, on this day as we approach the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. We take a moment as a nation to remember those who sacrificed so much, made the ultimate sacrifice, and those who continue to defend this country and our freedoms. You can see already the streets lining up with Canadians here to take a moment to pay respect to those people and consider what has been done. Good morning, I'm Rosemary Barton here, just in front of the National War Memorial here in the nation's capital. Just an honor to be here with you, as always, for this Remembrance Day, such an important day for Canada, for all of us to take a moment and consider. And through the next couple of hours, you are going to hear, as you did off the top there, from some soldiers still serving and many veterans sharing parts of their stories, sometimes, as you heard at the beginning, with such great humility. And in order to help you understand and be able to communicate with everyone on this important day, American Sign Language interpretation is also available for this ceremony today. As you can see there on your screen, it will be streaming on CBC at CBCNews.ca, on CBC Gem, and on the CBC News app. So everyone can take a moment and consider things as the morning unfolds, as it does in a beautiful day, I must say, a beautiful day here in downtown Ottawa for mid-November, which means that there will be lots of people lining the streets, and it also means that the veterans will have an easier time when they stand and sit outside here by the National War Memorial. I will have lots of people here to help us with our coverage here today, including my colleague Ashley Burke, who is down beside the National War Memorial, and I believe she has a guest with her already this morning. Good morning, Ashley.
Good morning. I do. I've got retired Major Philip Barry with me. He served in Cyprus, he served in Germany, Central America, 36 years in the military. He was in the infantry, a foot officer, and he's here today with his grandson and his son as well. Can you tell me about a moment from your military career that you think about that still sticks with you?
The best day I had in the Army, it happened a couple of times, in fact, was when I was in Central America as the Central American Civil War was winding down. And in northern Nicaragua, there were the government army and the resistance army were both moving around. and every once in a while they'd bump into each other, although there was a ceasefire. And I remember a couple of occasions when the resistance army was trying to move to the place it was told to demobilize, and they had to cross through the lines of the government army. And the government guy got on our radio and said, "These guys are moving through our territory, and if you don't fix it, we're going to have to shoot." And the other fellows felt the same way. And we were able to, middle of the night, that we were told not to go out at night, we went and managed to talk them through it with the cooperation and the goodwill of both sides. The thing to remember about peacekeeping is it doesn't work unless the people want to make peace. And neither of them wanted a fight. And so we were able to work out a way of getting the resistance army through the garrison of the government army safely in the middle of the night. Was I ever nervous? But it took the cooperation of both sides or it wouldn't have happened.
What a moment. Your father also served in the Second World War,
Yes.
and he almost didn't survive. Tell me what happened.
He was at the Battle of the Moro River, which is not the first. By this time they'd been crossing Italy for several months. And at the Battle of the Moro River was a terrible battle and very, very hard, ultimately successful. Dad was in the Hastings Prince Edward, and he was, I think, in the first attack across the river. He was early, as they were nearing the river, he was shot in the leg, nearly hit the femoral artery, nearly hit the bone, nearly hit the femoral nerve. He would have been crippled for life. It didn't quite happen. And if it had hit the artery, he would have died within minutes. He said later it was the luckiest thing that happened to him during the war, because 5 minutes later he would have been killed for sure. All his friends were.
And you were under a year old at that time, and you had a father growing up.
That's right. Yeah, I met him.
Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story, Major Barry. We appreciate it.
Thank you
for your service.
interest. Thank you for being here. It's so important.
Back to you, Rosie.
Thanks, Ashley. Thank you so much. Interesting, because we are marking 2 anniversaries that sort of touch on that story. Both the 60th anniversary of the start of the peace mission to Cyprus, more than 25,000 Canadians served there, and of course the 80th anniversary of D-Day was earlier this year, and Tim Cook was there to remember that, and we'll get to him in just a moment. But before we move on, we do want to take a moment to remember why we are here today and to remind you of those who made the ultimate sacrifice. Another look there at the National War Memorial, known as the Response, with the 22 figures on it that represent different parts of the military, topped by those 2 figures to represent peace and freedom. And that's where people will gather here today in Ottawa to mark Remembrance Day. And with me, as always, it's become our regular visit, is Tim Cook. He's the chief historian at the Canadian War Museum, author or editor of some 19 books about the military and Canadian history. Nice to see you again this year, Tim.
Thanks, Rosie. It's great to be with you.
You've had a busy year, but I know you were with Adrian for D-Day earlier this year, which was the 80th anniversary of that. It was a remarkable moment for so many people, but there are a lot of different moments that we're marking, and as always, love to know what you're thinking about right now today.
Yeah, well, the statistics that were shown there, almost 118,000 Canadians who have been killed in service for this country. They are marked by the books of remembrance behind us in the memorial chamber. Here we are, this site of remembrance, a day to reflect, I think, on sorrow and grief, but also pride for those who have served. And I was just reflecting reflecting on the colonel there who served in a peacekeeping mission, but his father in a time of war. So we have war and peace, those who have passed on and those who are still with us.
And that's so often what happens in this country and others, where it is families who give themselves to military service. It becomes part of their tradition, part of their family culture.
Yeah, it really is. I'm struck by this. Lucky to be at the War Museum for over 20 years now. We see so often grandparents, their kids and grandkids, these conversations that happen there, that happen everywhere. And this is a day of conversations, I think, isn't it? A day to reflect, a day to talk about our families at war, our communities, and our country as well.
Yeah, at a moment where the world is in conflict in various parts, and we will talk about that as well. But let me first go down to the crowds, because that is also what makes this day special, is that many people come from places other than Ottawa even to come to the National War Memorial for this special day. And David Thurton is with us now, and I believe he has a guest. David.
Hey, Rosie, I do have a guest, but I just want to show you the crowds. You know, pretty large, I'd say, so far. I mean, look at that. You can see people are just standing underneath, on top of the light post over there, trying to get a good view of, the National Memorial. Lots of people staking out their spots. And as you said, people from all different walks of life, different places, different provinces, and even territories. I see some rangers over there, but I'm going to introduce you to one guest here. Sydney, thank you for stopping and chatting with us. What brought you out here today?
I have always come to Remembrance Day. It's always been something that's extremely important to me. My brother was in the Air Force Cadets. I have friends that currently serve in the military, family that used to serve, and it's just truly a day for me to come out and appreciate the current and past sacrifices of the members of the Canadian Armed Forces.
I mean, I don't want to out you, but you're skipping class to be here.
I'm also skipping work, and I'm also skipping class later today. But in my opinion, there's no greater importance for Remembrance Day, and nowhere I'd rather be because of the sacrifices that are made. I'm able to study in peace because of the sacrifices that members of the Canadian Armed Forces have made and do make. So it's important for me to honor that in my own way.
And you're a veteran in your own way. You don't ever miss this ceremony here in Ottawa. You made sure that you didn't miss it today as well.
I unfortunately had to miss it due to COVID. Obviously, we all had to miss it. But the years that I've lived in Ottawa, and even prior to coming to Ottawa, wherever I was, I always made sure that I attended a Remembrance Day ceremony in some respect, because it is that important. It is a day that I don't miss. And it's always a day that I get up early for, too. I know one year I was here prior to 10 to 7 and in the morning, just to make sure that I had a good spot, because it's such a big deal to me and it means a lot.
Sydney, thank you so much for talking with us. I think you do have one of the best spots. You have a clear view of the War Memorial, and you have a great crowd around you. So, thank you for talking with us. Rosie, I'll send it back to you.
Thanks, David. And of course, David will bring more people and more guests. And indeed, lots of people skip school, skip work to come down for this moment because they believe it's important to be here. And some schools across the country do different things to bring some education to kids about this important day and the sacrifices made. And Deanna Sumanak-Johnson is in one of those communities in Waterdown, a community in Hamilton, Ontario. Deanna.
Rosie, that's right. I'm here in Waterdown, just outside of Hamilton. And yeah, there's many ways to get educated about Remembrance Day. Attending special ceremonies in Ottawa is one. And the school I'm at right here, the Waterdown District High School, they're having an assembly right behind me. And, Rosie, in recent years, it's been all about tackling the challenge of making the war relevant to young people who were born almost 1 century after the First World War began, and many of whom, unlike people like you and me, probably do not have grandparents, great-grandparents who might have fought in those wars or have lived experience of those times. So teachers are getting really resourceful on assigning projects that really bring home the relevance of this holiday. And with me, I have Lauren Reese, who is a grade 10 student. And here she is with a postcard. Do you want to show your postcard to the camera? Okay, Okay, so explain to me how the postcard project worked. You were assigned an actual soldier from the Waterdown region, a person who lived here just like you, and then what did you have to find out?
That he was actually writing to his wife on his birthday, and he wasn't able to come home to see her. I found out
You went to the archives to find this out, right?
and I found out lots about him and kind of, you know, his life growing up, what his parents were like, a lot about him, records, everything that I was able to find about him. It was all.
How old was he? Do you mind me asking?
I believe, I'm actually not too sure how old he was.
20s or? Yeah. What was it? Did anything surprise you when you were digging up facts about him?
The grammar and the use of language, kind of writing back, especially they were writing in cursive, and a lot of us young people, we don't really write in cursive that much.
Although it is in the Ontario curriculum now.
Exactly, but it was great to kind of read it and look over it, and yeah, the grammar was something that I found really interesting, and the way that they worded things. So
yeah, the language has evolved. Tell me, when you're doing this kind of primary source research, do you feel closer to this person and what he went through, the stress he'd been under, the kind of pressure he was under, the fear? Does it make it more real than, say, just reading a textbook?
100%. Like, it was, you know, early 20s, like mid 20s. Like, I'm 15 now, so that would be coming up, and especially all the things that he had to go through, just to, you know, like, support our country, and it was amazing. I felt really honored to be able to learn about him and what he's gone through, and it was a real honor.
Thank you so much for that, Lauren. And Rosie, we will be joining Lauren and the other students from this school that houses about 1,200 students as they make their way to the Legion, just about 5 minutes away. They will pin their poppies to the cenotaph there. And there's also a special project inside the Legion called the Museum of Hope that was actually established by one of the teachers at this school, where students curate and take care of this museum. They run it. They bring their own artifacts that they've gathered and local artifacts talking about the sacrifices that Canadian soldiers have made in the two world wars, as well as other conflicts that Canada has been involved in, like Afghanistan. There will be a veteran on hand from Afghanistan to talk about his experiences. And as this challenge that many teachers are really happy to take on, Rosie, in making the wars and Canada's sacrifices matter to these kids that were born so many years later, and in a world so different than the world that Lauren is just describing. Rosie.
For sure. Deanna Sumanek-Johnson in Waterdown, Ontario this morning for us. Thanks, Deanna. Lovely to hear how educators and teachers come up with ideas to really connect soldiers, people who have died, directly with young people as they're trying to understand history. And as always, on days like this, we are marking certain anniversaries. And this year, we have spent part of this year already marking the 80th anniversary of D-Day. 14,000 Canadians landed at Juno Beach, including Jim Parks, who told us what that day was like for him.
The idea was to get you in first light. So the time of day, it could have been 4, 5, 6 in the morning. Then it was on. And we were actually, with our landing craft tank, we're going into shore. And the boat was disabled. Yeah, we were supposed to land right on the shore, but we couldn't. Our carriers got overflowed with water, and we had to swim. We lost everything. I had nothing, no weapon. No, you just move forward. You're always trained to move forward and take cover, do what you had to do. I think you're afraid all the time, but you don't realize it. You're anxious. You want to get cover. You want to get cover away from the firing. So that's why we got into the sandbank and waited for the other people to come in.
See the military parade starting to take place. Dignitaries will be arriving shortly as well for the official ceremony of Remembrance Day to get underway. But lovely to hear from Jim Parks there, and I'll bring Tim Cook in because, Tim, you were over there to commemorate the 80th anniversary of D-Day at a time when I think the latest estimate from Veterans Affairs Canada is there are about 7,300 Second World War vets and Korean War vets still alive at a time when we really need to take those stories, cherish them, and I know you're doing a lot of that work, preserve those stories.
Yeah, great to hear from Jim Parks, who landed on
Incredible.
D-Day. Very few of those veterans left, as you said. From a country, we put in 1.1 million Canadians in uniform. So 1 in 10 Canadians, 1 in 3 adult males during the Second World War. An incredible exertion. And as you say, we're on the razor's edge. We will be losing them over the next couple of years. And I wonder what this day will mean when we've lost our last Second World War veteran. You know, for the First World War, they're all gone now. John Babcock, 109 years old, was the last veteran to pass away in 2010. And I remember people asking me, is that it for the First World War? Is it now going into recede into the past? And I didn't think so, because partially because, as we've said, it's in our families. It's, you know, there are millions of Canadians with a family link there. But we've also done a better job in recording these histories. That interview will live on, as will so many. So this is our obligation now, I think, to listen and to tell these stories, because now is our opportunity.
And that's why this day is so important for so many of those reasons. And of course, as well as honoring those who have served in the past, lost their lives, we honor those serving still. And in order to talk a little bit about that and some of what the world is facing right now, Ashley Burke is with the Chief of the Defence Staff. Ashley.
Hi, Rosie. I am with the Chief of Defence Staff, General Jenny Carignan. She's new in this role, but she was trained as a combat engineer, which is one of those jobs where soldiers go out and they disarm bombs. It's very dangerous. There's a lot of lives lost in Afghanistan doing that job. She also served in Afghanistan, as well as in Bosnia and Golan Heights. I'm wondering, in the role that you're in right now, what you're thinking about this Remembrance Day.
Good morning, Ashley. Thank you for having me. Today is always a very special day for me personally, as it brings back a lot of emotions and memories as well. Memories of people serving, memories of people being absolutely generous of their time, but also people who we have lost as well, friends, colleagues, and then again, lots of mixed emotions today.
There are a lot of conflicts going on in the world right now. What's going on in the Middle East, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And when you started this job, you said you wanted Canada to be ready to respond to emerging threats from China and Russia in 5 years. What's at stake if that doesn't happen?
So it is very important, again, that Canadians be reminded of the service that they can offer Canada via the Canadian Armed Forces. So it will be very, very important that we are able to recruit volunteers from generous Canadians, again, who would be willing to serve. So this is really the priority number one for us.
Dealing with the staffing crisis. And as well, you served in Afghanistan. It's been 10 years since Canadian troops pulled out. And I wonder, there are Canadian Armed Forces members who've talked about how they're conflicted and wonder if it was worth it because of the lives lost. For you, when you think back about your time and those you know that passed away, was it worth it?
Every time we engage into an operation, it is very important to understand that we never know how it's going to turn out, and we have to give it our best, the best that we can do as we engage, and then nobody can really predict the outcome. It is for sure that Afghanistan will have changed because we were there. Now it will be up to us, up to them to take it where it needs to go. But again, I think we need to understand the difficulty and the complexity of getting involved into these conflicts. And then again, it was definitely worth it in the end.
In the U.S., we've seen a shift. The U.S. election, Donald Trump has been given another term in office. He's been very clear and adamant that his allies, he wants to see reach the 2% spending of their GDP on defense. Canada is not expected to reach that until 2032. Do you think Canada needs to move faster?
So I think we are currently in that transformational mandate. We are transforming the forces both from structure, organization, capabilities, and mindset as well. So we are doing all of that. And then we are definitely going to make all of those resources work for us. We have a new defense policy. We have new investments coming in. And then we're going to work as fast as we can to make sure that we create those capabilities that Canada needs.
Do you have any concerns or worries about an ally like the U.S. saying, you need to move faster, you need to do this now? And Trump's also made threats that, that needs to happen.
We have very, very strong relationships, military to military, with our U.S. colleagues, and then we are definitely going to keep those relationships solid as we go forward. So to me, it's doing that work with all of our allies.
Thank you for your time, General Carignan. That's General Carignan, the Chief of Defense Staff. She was also in charge of changing the military's culture before taking this role.
Ashley Burke, thank you so much. Nice to hear from General Carignan. I think perhaps her first interview since getting the job, and we'll hear more from her. And we'll also talk more about Afghanistan through the next couple of hours, the 10th anniversary since Canada left that mission. But first we want to talk about some of the soldiers, some of the Canadian Armed Forces serving right now. About 4,400 members deployed in operations all around the world, everywhere from the Middle East to Europe. Canada's largest international mission is Operation Reassurance, about 1,900 members deployed to support the NATO mission in Eastern Europe to protect and defend NATO allies and also help in the war in Ukraine. This morning, there was a large Remembrance Day parade there with a couple thousand soldiers. They took a moment in Latvia to remember. Most of them serving there are Canadians, there are Latvians, and there are also members from 13 NATO countries that make up the Canadian-led brigade. And so let's go now to Riga, Latvia, to Colonel Jim Smith. He's the commander of Task Force Latvia. He's in charge of all those men and women you saw there. Hello, Colonel. Thank you so much for making the time on this Remembrance Day.
Rosemary, thank you for having me. It's a real privilege. As you can see behind me, I'm about 7 hours ahead of you guys, so it's pretty dark here. I'm currently located at the Brothers Cemetery in Riga, and you can see a bunch of lights behind me. These are all individual lights at gravestones because the 11th of November also is a Lech Plesis Day for the Latvians, and they celebrate their Latvian independence or freedom fighters that sought their independence back in 1919, so 105 years ago. So we have a lot to remember today.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Tell me, what is it like right now to be the commander in charge of, yes, Canadian troops, but other NATO troops as well, as part of Operation Reassurance?
Well, Rosemary, that's a great question. I'm encouraged every morning when I get up because I'm working with some very fine Canadians that come here from across the country. I'm working with some great allies, and it's, I'm very privileged with the people that are here. We are working hard. We're not looking for a fight, but we're ready to defend the peace that we have, and we appreciate.
How much is that shaping sort of what people are doing there? The fact that this threat is real, that it is right now focused on Ukraine, but that NATO allies are sort of ramping up their readiness and their military preparation because of the threat from Russia. How does that change the way you do your job, Colonel?
It doesn't really change our job. Canada's been leading the multinational forces here for 7 years. And with the uplift in the last 2 years since the invasion, Canada has gone from basically a battle group size element here, and we've over doubled our Canadian presence on the ground. So we've now got a brigade here. We take it very seriously. We're working hard. The brigade that is here just finished an exercise with our allies over the last couple of weeks to demonstrate interoperability and to exercise their command. All working together to demonstrate that we are ready and we have the resolve to prepare to do whatever is required to defend our alliance.
How important is it for Canada to be in Europe as part of that operation? Many Canadians might look at that, Colonel, and think that's very far away. We don't need to worry about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, it has been over 30 years since Canada exercised the brigade over here in Europe. We realize that peace starts here. And so security in Latvia is security for NATO, which is security for Canada. And this is incredibly important. So we must be here to be arm to arm with our allies. And even the parades that we had this morning was a real show of solidarity as, you know, allied countries were standing side by side, shoulder to shoulder on parade, remembering the sacrifices of the fallen who stood before us.
What do you think about on Remembrance Day, Colonel, given the life that you've spent and then the people you've known and the personal sacrifices you've had to make?
Yeah, Rosemary, thank you for that. I think back to over 100 years ago when we were at the First World War and we came together as a country. So the aspect of unity, we all came together and we made that sacrifice for the peace. And so I think all Canadians should probably reflect upon that as well. You know, peace is hard-earned, and we should not take it for granted.
Sure is. Anyone you would like to say hi to, Colonel, who might be watching here in Canada this morning?
Yeah, I'd like to say hello to all my friends and family back home.
Well, I'm sure they got the message loud and clear. Thank you for making time for us, Colonel. Your job is very important, and thank you for your service on this day and every day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, always nice to hear from members currently serving, and of course Canada playing such a leading role in Latvia, as we've heard, and I'll bring in Tim for this. You know, I don't know how much time I've spent talking about Latvia and Ukraine and Eastern Europe, really concerned about Russia's incursion into Ukraine, and a war I think that has gone on far longer than many people imagine. And now coming at a time when there is going to be a new U.S. president who has, as you heard Ashley asking the CDS, very particular ideas about defense spending. I wonder how you think that might change how Canada responds.
Yeah, well, we live in a very dangerous world. I think we're all aware of that. And you asked a great question there of Canadians thinking, well, this is really far away. Yeah. It is. Our greatest shield has always been geography. And yet, you know, we are part of multiple alliances. And I think our chief of the defense staff spoke very carefully there, but we clearly need to spend more on defense. We need to show our allies, especially the United States, of where we can contribute, and that may be in Latvia on nearly the front lines, but it's also here in North America. The United States and Canada defend the Northern Hemisphere. It can't be done without us, and I think as a historian, you know, I'm more comfortable looking backwards, Rosie, and we have been able to show the Americans through NORAD, through the Second World War, through our times of standing with them. Think of the Korean War, our many conflicts. And so we have been their good neighbors and good allies in the past and to this day. And I think not only do we have to spend more and in the right place, but we need to talk about it more effectively.
Let's just dip in here a little bit to the Veterans Parade as we see many veterans arriving here at the National War Memorial. Made their way down to the National War Memorial. Of course, the officials, the dignitaries will be arriving in not too long. Both the Governor General and the Prime Minister will be here today. Let's go back now, though, to David Thurton, who's in the crowd, and talking to people who wanted to be here on this day, wanted to be here in person. David.
Hey, Rosie. Yeah, no, you know, we're talking to a lot of people in the crowd, and you can see right now they are applauding the veterans who just, you know, paraded past. A little gesture of gratitude on this day, thanking them for their service. and two people who are here grateful for the service of so many Canadians in the different conflicts, and your own family members who served in those conflicts. John, Pam, thank you for joining me. Did I get this right? You're from Brighton, Ontario. And what brings you out here today in particular?
Well, this is something that we've always wanted to do, is to come to Ottawa to observe the Remembrance Day ceremony and to basically pay tribute to all of the armed forces, no matter what division, for the service.
Let's just do that.
For their ultimate sacrifice, and just give a little thanks and show some respect.
And not just all the armed forces, your own family served. John, do you want to tell me about your, was it?
My father served in the 5th Division Service Corps and during the Second World War, and so grateful for what he did and all his mates did to provide us with this best country in the world.
And Pam, your dad served as well in the Second World War.
My dad served in the Second World War. My paternal grandfather served in the First and the Second World War. And my mom's 3 brothers, they served in the Second World War. And thankfully, our family was blessed. They all made it home safely.
In fact, you were telling me, Pam, that your dad and your mom got married, and then he went off to fight.
They got married in December of 1940, and my dad left in 1941. So my mom was basically a new bride, saying goodbye to her husband and hoping like the Dickens that he would come back safe and sound. And he did.
Mercifully, he did. And speaking of people who are married, of course, you all are married, and you're celebrating
52nd wedding anniversary.
52nd. Thank you for coming out here today. Thank you for talking to me, and congratulations. Happy anniversary. Thank you, Rosie. Send it back to you.
Thanks, David. That's just what we were talking about how so many families through generations have made the sacrifice and decided to serve the Canadian Armed Forces. Let's go back to Deanna Sumanak-Johnson. She's in Waterdown, Ontario, at a school where they're trying different ways to get kids engaged on this day and educated about some of these sacrifices. Deanna.
Absolutely, Rosie. I was the history nerd kid, and so these kids are my brethren. And here we have Mohammed and we have Samir, and I was told that they went above and beyond on their postcard project, learning about Mohammed, if you want to hold it up, Samir as well. Here are the postcards. These postcards, they had to learn about actual soldiers who fought in the First World War, who were right from this region, Waterdown. Mohammed, what did you find out about your soldier?
I found out a lot of information about him, like his height, molars. I had to research all that. I found out he was like 5'8" and 3/4. So yeah, that type of stuff.
Yeah, a lot taller then than it is right now, right? Because people were smaller. Tell me, what else did you find out about him? Did he have any family?
I didn't see anything about it. There wasn't a lot of information about his family, but I did find where he's born, Port Credit, Ontario.
Okay, so not too far from here, just between here and Toronto. Yeah. How did it make you feel? I want to ask you, how did it make you feel that he lived just like you do in this area? Did you feel closer to him?
Yeah, I guess, but I mean, he went out there. He obviously have a different life than me. So.
And a young man, not too far from your age, right?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. I want to ask Samir as well. Now, Samir, when we're talking about a day like this, your family moved here from Afghanistan. You were born in Canada, so the significance of war and peace, I think, is probably something you get quite well.
Yeah, no, it means a lot to them, because they really moved here because of the war. And so, yeah, today is like a really special day for them.
Yeah. And tell me, what did you find out about your soldier?
He wasn't actually born in Canada. He was born in Ireland and came over here, kind of just like my parents. And he fought. He was 5'4". Basically, he didn't have that much birthmarks, no nothing. Just.
So you found out about physical, because they would go through a health examination when they were enlisting in the army, right? You got to kind of physically picture what these guys looked like. How did you feel reading about him? Did you feel like he was someone you could have known?
Oh yeah, most definitely. I think he could have just been my friend. He could have just walked around in this hallways, He could have been anyone. And then he was like my age too when he went into the war. So it's kind of special.
Crazy, right? Really blows your mind how young they were, just like you guys. Thank you both for being here. You can tell that they're young because they're not cold, Rosie, standing in their hoodies here. And Samir and Mohammed and all the other students from school are going to head on over to the Legion, and I will be joining them, where they will participate in many other activities that really bring home the importance of this day to these young people who were born almost a century after the Great War began. Rosie.
Deanna, thank you so much for that, and really appreciate the young man Samir, whose family came from Afghanistan, because of course this year marks 10 years since Canada left Afghanistan. More than 40,000 Canadian Armed Forces members served in Afghanistan. 158 Canadian Forces members, 1 Canadian diplomat were killed in that war, and the Silver Cross Mother, who will be arriving shortly, also represents the sacrifice of that war, and we'll talk more about her in a moment. But Tim, just maybe a reflection about that 10 years. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago, and I know there are so many Canadian Armed Forces who have very conflicted feelings about the mission, who are proud of what they did, but now see how the country has slipped back into Taliban rule and feel very sad and disappointed that has happened. Yeah.
And we have to understand that, right? The fall of Afghanistan was, I think, devastating for the world, for Canadians, but especially those who fought there, who bled there, who lost friends there. We talk about the 158 killed, but there are about 2,000 wounded as well, many with life-changing wounds. What was it for? They have asked that. And I think, well, that young man we just saw, there's one small glimpse, right? He said he was a war refugee or a refugee to this country. Yep. There are so many refugees who we have taken in from the war zone. Think of the Ukraine, Haiti, Afghanistan, and before that, Vietnam, Hungary, other places. Our country is filled with people who have been shaped by war. Yeah. And so that may be one way to reflect upon the service and sacrifice in Afghanistan. Nonetheless, it will always remain conflicted.
Yeah, and that is, I think, part of why they have chosen this year's Silver Cross Mother. Maureen Anderson is her name. She's chosen to, every year, the Royal Canadian Legion does this, and every year they choose someone to represent all mothers who have lost a child in military service of this country. In her case, she and her husband raised 2 children, Ron and his younger brother Ryan, and in fact both of them served in Afghanistan, but both of them died home in Canada, both deeply afflicted by what happened in Afghanistan and were diagnosed with PTSD. Ron took his own life in 2004. It was 7 years after he'd come back from the mission in Afghanistan. Ryan also, again, served in Afghanistan, also suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, and he died in 2017. Their mother, Maureen, attributes both of their deaths to that reality, PTSD, and we're going to talk more about that after the ceremony itself, because the conversation around that has become, obviously, Tim, much more open, a much better understanding, but still so challenging, I think, for so many people when it comes to the mental health wounds of war, and in that family, so deeply, deeply affected by that.
Yeah, a devastating story,
yes.
I think, and often the Silver Cross Mother, which goes really back to 1939, and before that, the First World War, where we issued the Silver Cross in 1919. She stands for all those mothers, all those parents, all those families that have lost people. And usually we think of those losses during the war.
That's right.
Those war years. But we have a better sense, as you've said, of the legacy of war, the dark legacy, the mental scars. We've devoted more time and energy towards these wounds, but it's never easy. And one of the great tragedies of Afghanistan is to reveal to us, I think, of how that war lives on in the minds of so many veterans. That, I suppose, is one role this year of the Silver Cross Mother,
yes.
to open up that conversation, that discussion that is so important.
We are just now awaiting the arrival of the dignitaries. I will say it was lovely, blue sky and sunny. It's a little overcast now, so we were hoping that there'd be a fly past that would happen. We'll see whether or not that happens, given the way the clouds have now crept in here in downtown Ottawa, but that is usually an important moment of the ceremony as well. It is so quiet in downtown Ottawa right now. It is the one day of the year where this hotbed of political rhetoric quiets down and everyone takes a moment to sort of focus on the same thing and think about the same thing. And indeed, the Prime Minister will be here soon to lay his wreath, as will the Governor General, who is this year, as Commander-in-Chief, choosing to wear the Royal Armed Forces military uniform because they are marking a 100-year anniversary as well.
Yeah, a proud history of our Air Force. 1924, but many of them veterans from the First World War, where Canadians distinguished themselves. Billy Bishop, William Barker, Raymond Collishaw, heroes to previous generations, probably less well known today. Incredible service in Canada during the Second World War. We had about 225,000 Canadians serve in the RCAF, fighting to defend North America, taking the war to Nazi-occupied Germany, and continuing to this day. And our Air Force has always played a really key role, I think, in supporting our allies. And we've talked a bit about that. An ability to fight, think of in the Gulf War in 1990 or in 1999 and other campaigns as well. So a proud history there, and one that hopefully, if the weather holds, we will see a fly past.
We will. This is the Prime Minister's motorcade arriving here at the National War Memorial. He, of course, one of, as we've talked about, a number of dignitaries we are waiting for in order for the ceremony to get underway. Must say, I found the security a little more intense this year than normal. More streets were closed, more police presence. Obviously, we're living in challenging times, so perhaps that is what we're seeing reflected here. All right. Remember, this day is put on by the Royal Canadian Legion. They are the ones who organize the event and have people there and welcome, obviously, the dignitaries as they arrive. Prime Minister saying hello to his new Chief of the Defence Staff, first woman ever to hold that role after the departure of Wayne Eyre. And now we're just waiting for the Governor General to arrive. You can also see on your screen the Veterans Affairs Minister.
Ladies and gentlemen, the National Silver Cross Mother, Mrs. Maureen Anderson, is arriving. Mrs. Anderson of Oromocto, New Brunswick, is the mother of both the late Sergeant Ron Anderson and his younger brother, the late Sergeant Ryan Anderson. Both were part of the Royal Canadian Regiment, an infantry regiment of the Canadian Army. Each served several tours of duty overseas, including one tour together in Afghanistan. They went on to live with the challenges of post-traumatic stress disorder. Ron later took his own life in 2014, and his younger brother Ryan died a few years later in 2017. Mesdames et messieurs, la Mère Nationale de la Croix d'Argent.
All right, so this is the Silver Cross Mother arriving now, as we said. The Silver Cross Mother chosen to represent all families. And how did that come about, Tim, this idea of choosing someone to represent the loss? And it has taken different forms over the years, and I have been lucky enough to talk to some of these wonderful people.
Yeah, well, it goes back to the First World War and those terrible losses, 68,000 Canadians and Newfoundlanders who were killed, and often the mothers who bore that terrible grief. And the issuing of a silver cross, a small silver cross, and you see it on the lapel here of the Silver Cross Mother in 1919. Sadly, we have issued over 100,000 of these continuing, but the attendance of the Silver Cross Mother emerged really in 1936 with the Vimy pilgrimage, where 6,000 veterans went back to unveil the Vimy Monument, and then formally in 1939. And then each year we have selected a Silver Cross Mother, usually the two world wars up until about the 1960s, and now a more varied number of mothers who represent other wars and conflicts. And sometimes they're there to help shed light, as we have said, on different wars we don't think about. The Merchant Navy in 1988, for example, the Korean War before that, but now on this mental wounds. And I think of her standing for so many mothers and so many parents. It's a role no one would want, but it's a role that is so important.
And now the arrival of the Governor General, who, remember, in this country is also the Commander-in-Chief of the Canadian Armed Forces. General and Commander-in-Chief allowed to choose a uniform to wear, and this year, in order to honor the 100th anniversary of the Royal Canadian Air Force, is wearing that uniform. She's there with her husband, Whit Fraser. And once the Governor General takes her spot, the ceremony will begin in earnest. And so we will be quiet throughout that ceremony and come back with more thoughts and more guests after the ceremony. I do hope that you'll take us a moment to sit back, watch, and remember.
Remembrance Day Parade! Royal salute! Salute! CBC News.
Parade, stand at ease. Color party. Order, color. Color party, stand at ease.
Ladies and gentlemen, O Canada, with members of the Central Band of the Canadian Armed Forces and the Ottawa Children's Choir. Mesdames et Messieurs, O Canada, avec des membres de la musique centrale des Forces armées canadiennes et du Chœur des enfants d'Ottawa.
Parade, attention! True
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
Ils ne vieilliront pas comme nous qui leur avons survécu. Ils ne connaîtront jamais l'outrage ni
shall not
le
weary
poids des
them,
années.
nor the years condemn.
Viendra l'heure du crépuscule,
At the going
et
down of
sur
the
le
sun
aurore,
and in the
nous
morning,
nous souviendrons d'eux.
we will remember them.
The response in Michif is on va se rappeler des autres. Je me rappelle, ils vivront pas comme nous autres. Ils seront pas accaparés louches. Quand ils se couchent et puis quand ils se lèvent, on va se rappeler des autres.
Parade, stand at ease.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Mesdames et messieurs, veuillez vous asseoir.
On this solemn day, we gather in memory of those who lost their life so they could live in freedom according to the value we hold dear. In a spirit of peace and gratitude, this moment prompts us to reflect on the sacrifices of our heroes and their families. En ce moment de silence, nous reconnaissons le courage de toutes les personnes qui ont servi, laissant
Those who
derrière elles
served,
leurs proches
leaving
pour
behind them their
défendre
loved
quelque
ones,
chose de
to
plus grand
defend
qu'elles-mêmes.
something bigger than
Leur
themselves.
action nous rappelle la
And
force
their
de
action
l'unité.
reminds us of the
C'est dans
strength
cette
of unity.
unité que nous
It is
trouvons
in that
l'espoir
unity that we
et la
find hope
résilience
and
face aux
resilience
défis
in
que
the
notre
face
monde
of the
continue
challenges
de rencontrer.
our world continues to put before
Laissons-nous
us.
façonner par les leçons
Allow
du
us to be
passé.
shaped by the lessons of the
conflit,
past.
Nous apprenons la
In
puissance
conflict,
de l'amour.
we
Un
understand
amour
the
qui lie
power
les
of love,
familles,
love
les
that
communautés
unites families,
et toute
communities, and all humanity.
Ces héros que nous commémorons
These
aujourd'hui
heroes that we
ont été
commemorate
guidés par
today
cette force
were guided by
envers
that
leurs
strength,
semblables, ainsi
strength towards
que
their
par les idéaux
fellow men
de
and
paix
women,
et de justice.
searching for peace and justice.
In remembrance, we are filled with gratitude for the peace and liberties we enjoy. This peace was hard-won, and its preservation is shared responsibility. We must be thankful, not only for those who fought, but also for the acts of kindness and cooperation that helped heal the wounds of conflict and division. Let this Remembrance Day inspire us to carry forward the legacy of those who came before us. May we be bearers of peace, custodians of compassion, and champions of justice. In this spirit, let us keep their memory alive, not just today, but in our everyday lives. Lest we forget, n'oublions jamais.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice-Regal Party will now begin placing their wreaths. Mesdames et messieurs, le cortège vice-royal déposera maintenant leur couronne.
À l'onzième heure du 11e jour du 11e mois, nous sommes unis en tant que
We
nation
are
dans
united as a nation
souvenir solennel.
in solemn
Today,
memory
from coast
of our
to
veterans.
coast, we gather to honor the brave service members and their loved ones who sacrificed for the liberties and values we hold dear. These courageous men and women fought for freedom, justice, and equality for all Canadians. Their sacrifices of body, mind, and spirit represent the highest commitment to those who call Canada home. The members of our armed forces embody many virtues, but perhaps none more powerful than unity. In a world often divided, the unwavering bond among our troops serves as a beacon of strength for us all. The Canadian Armed Forces, reflecting our nation's rich diversity, remind us of the remarkable achievements possible when we stand together for a cause greater than ourselves. Our troops teach us, united we rise, unbreakable we stand. Prime Minister Lester B. Pearson once said, "Canada is a country built on diversity, but diversity requires responsibility to each other, to our country, and to our future." In every challenge, our soldiers embody this truth, showing us that in times of adversity, it is our shared resolve that propels us forward. Imagine soldiers advancing under fire, trusting each other with their lives. Differences in background, belief, or experience fade in the face of their unity. Bound by a commitment to one another, they live by the creed, "No soldier left behind," honoring every comrade, regardless of race, religion, or orientation. This unity, forged in adversity, endures even the harshest trials. As we honor our veterans, we must remember, if we do not remain united, we risk failing the clarion call of "lest we forget." No matter the challenges, we look to our troops for inspiration, digging deep and resolutely declaring, "United we rise, unbreakable we stand." Nous sommes résolus à nous unir non
We are
seulement
determined
pour le
to
bien
unite
de notre nation,
against evil,
aussi pour le
but
bien
to
de nos
defend
troupes.
our nation
Just
and
as
our
our
troops.
soldiers pledge to leave no one behind on the battlefield, we must pledge as a nation to leave no veteran or their families behind. The best among us have fought for our freedom. It is now our duty to fight for their well-being as they return to Canadian soil. On this day of remembrance, let us commit to supporting our veterans and their loved ones. Let us uphold their legacy by strengthening the unity of our nation, embracing our diversity, and ensuring our collective voice remains louder than any forces that seek to divide us. Let us remember the words of Canadian poet John McCrae. "Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw. The torch be yours to hold it high. If you break faith with us who die. The torch is ours to hold it high. This is our call to uphold the unity and values for which our soldiers fought, the values that bind us together as Canadians, and to keep that torch aflame for generations to come. With profound gratitude in our hearts and the weight of sacrifice upon us, we honor our falling by proclaiming, "United we rise, unbreakable we stand." May God guide us in remembrance. Donne-nous la force de nous unir
Give us
dans
the strength
l'adversité.
to unite in the
And
face of
through
adversity.
that unity, forever honor the sacrifices of our soldiers their families, and their loved ones. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, God Save the King with the Ottawa Children's Choir. Mesdames et messieurs, que Dieu protège le roi avec le chœur des enfants d'Ottawa.
Remembrance Day Parade, attention!
Thank you for your attendance at the National Remembrance Day Ceremony. Today, as a grateful nation, we stand in collective remembrance of all who have fallen in the military service of Canada. May we never forget. Please stay in position for the march-off and departure of the Vice-Regal Party. We will announce when you may enter the site. Merci d'être parmi nous
And that
à
marks the
l'occasion
end
de
of
la
the official
cérémonie
part of
nationale
this
du
Remembrance
jour
Day
du
ceremony
souvenir.
here in the
Aujourd'hui
nation's
est
capital. We
l'occasion
will now
de notre
see
nation
dignitaries depart there, the Governor General, the
exprime
Prime
à
Minister,
l'unisson
and then
souvenir
the
de
official
ceux et celles qui
march-off,
sont
where
morts
there will
au
be
service de notre
soldiers
pays.
and veterans marching
N'oublions
away
jamais.
from the
Veuillez
cenotaph.
rester en place
We might
pendant
dip
le
in
défilé
as
de
we
sortie
see the Governor General and the Prime Minister leave. Sometimes they stop and chat with people. I should say that it did start to rain a little bit during the ceremony, but that did not seem to detract anyone from being here. And in fact, this is one of the biggest turnouts we've seen in a number of years. People stretched all the way back down Wellington and down Elgin, which looks down from the War Memorial. If you're not familiar with Ottawa, I would say probably thousands of people, it's safe to say, have made their way out here today. And that probably leads me to a good moment to speak to Tim about that, because it has changed over time, the way crowds have shown up. Obviously, in 2020, the first time ever, crowds were told not to come because of the pandemic, which was it was kind of devastating to have nobody here.
Yeah.
As we watched the Silver Cross Mother leave there, but it has ebbed and flowed, and I think gotten to a space now where people do feel compelled to show up.
I think they do.
Their presence is important.
Yeah, and you've said it nicely. Ebbed and flowed. We have paid attention. We have borne witness to this, but other times there has been apathy. And in the 60s and 70s, it looked like Remembrance Day was going to die out. Just nobody came out. Of course, we were going through the Vietnam War, anti-war, a changing of generations. But I think since about the late 1990s, we've seen a return of larger crowds. The 50th anniversary of the end of the Second World War was a really key event. I think we're Canadians.
The Prime Minister speaking with
woke up.
The U.S. Ambassador to Canada, David Cohen, just pausing there for a moment.
Well, we've both been lucky to speak to the ambassador before, and he's often talked about the important role of Canada in alliance warfare. And
sorry, I cut you off there.
Go
back to that. Yeah,
just that ebb and flow, and it's we're focused on Ottawa here and these large crowds, but everywhere across this country. there are Canadians in their own communities, usually coming together at the local cenotaph, which was probably built in the 1920s to mark the fallen, with added the names of the Second World War, the Korean War, and now more recent conflicts, sadly, those who have died in those communities. And I have always thought, as we heard there, that call to unity of purpose, which is so important with our armed forces, but also across the country.
Yeah. In terms of the values we're defending, yeah, the Rabbi Sher giving the benediction, but also probably speaking to the moment as well, the crisis in the Middle East that many people are feeling very deeply, saying, united we rise, unbreakable we stand. So obviously that has brought up so many emotions for people, that war. And I should say I did see Israel's ambassador to Canada in the crowd too, as part of the diplomatic contingent there today. This is the moment where veterans will march off, and they will march past the Governor General. Again, a little bit rainy, but not too bad for mid-November. And as we say, take a look at the crowds there as you see down the street, really hundreds and hundreds of people, which is, I'm sure, very, very noticed and appreciated by those veterans as they walk by.
Yeah, the marching here is always fascinating, isn't it? We have veterans of past wars. You saw the blue berets go by, and now more traditional uniforms. And it reminds me of the generations we are seeing here. I suspect there are no Second World War veterans, at least I hope not, marching here. But we saw them at D-Day for that ceremony. Yeah. Korean War veterans, as you've said, about 7,000 left, and more recent veterans. But even veterans of Afghanistan, if they were into their career and went in 2002, well, they could be 60 or 65 years old now. Yeah. So a group there. And, you know, I've been lucky to speak to veterans my whole life, and they've told me a number of things. I try to listen. The discussion around PTSD is an important one, and we brought that up. But others have said to me, you know, Tim, resilience is also there, and we care for each other. And veterans have informal networks, kinship networks. They take care of each other often, and I think that's important to remember as well. Hear and see the clapping of the crowds as the veterans march by on this Remembrance Day as a way to honor their service and those who have been lost. Very, very poignant moment. And again, just lovely to see so many people turn out for this event, particularly again this year. Seems to be a remarkable crowd here. Let's go down to David Thurton, who's in the crowd with a guest. David, over to you.
Hey, Rosie. Yeah, I just want to maybe introduce you quickly to a couple of people in the crowd. We have Major Colpitts here with family. Thank you for joining us. What did you think of the ceremony?
I think it was a great ceremony this morning. We've been here a few times. I've lived in Ottawa before. Just got back from Yellowknife. I was there for 4 years. And yeah, it's always a great time. This is the first time I think that all three of my children have been here. Their names are David, Jacob, and Ruth. 2 of them are in the Navy League Cadets, and yeah, they're loving it.
And there are plans. You guys have plans after, or this, now that the ceremony's over, it's not over for you guys. You have plans. What are you going to be doing next?
We are going to be doing a parade.
A parade, okay. So how do you feel about that?
I feel good, and I also feel like I don't want to faint.
I'm sure you won't faint. I'm sure you'll be fine. Dad will make sure of it. I should tell you, Rosie, we're in this section where a lot of people are coming by. If they're not well, and they're part of the ceremony, they come through here. So I think they would have been impacted by that. And listen, I got some other folks. That family was moved here from Yellowknife to Ottawa, and we have some rangers from the north who are with us. Not from Yellowknife, but I have Millie Clark from Whitehorse. Can you tell us a little about the Canadian Rangers? Not a lot of Canadians know about them.
We're part of one CRPG group. They have rangers in most of the communities up north. So I'm from Inuvik, Bev's from Inuvik, and Minnie too is from the Yukon.
All the way from up north. And Millie, maybe you could tell us, Minnie, excuse me, sorry about that, apologies. What brought you here to the Remembrance Ceremony here in Ottawa this year?
We were here to attend the Eagle Staff training, and we also attended a Junior Ranger conference.
And what was the ceremony like for you guys? How did you, it sounds like it's your first time here, and how did it feel?
It was very impressive. I grew up listening to the ceremony on the CBC Radio, and it was an honor to be here to watch in person.
Well, it's an honor to meet you folks. Thank you so much for your service, doing important work in Canada's North. Thank you. There you go, Rosie. People from all walks of life in different places and spaces. And with that, I think I'll just send it back to you.
All right, thank you for that, David. Yeah, lots of different people in the crowd. And again, the clapping continuing as the march-off continues. The Governor General still there with the Prime Minister and others. Maybe just a word about the Canadian Rangers, Tim, before I go to Ashley Burke. It's true that lots of people don't know about that contingent up north, so important for Canada's defense and security.
Yeah, great to see them in uniform there, the red uniform. Thousands of Canadian Rangers in our north, in our Arctic, playing a key role in security and sovereignty. We haven't always put enough resources into our Arctic security, and the Rangers have been there for us. And they remind me of the tremendous service of Indigenous Canadians, about 4,000 in the First World War, even more in the Second World War, in the Korean War. We had Canadian Indigenous people who served in the American Army, often just crossing the border.
Right.
And many of these veterans, they have testified, they talked about this, feeling like an equal in the armed forces in the days when they were not treated as equals, when they didn't have the right to vote, and then coming back to Canada and facing that systemic racism. And many of these veterans who used their veteran status to fight for greater rights. I think of Francis Pegmagabo, received 3 military medals during the First World War, then came back and fought for Indigenous rights. And there are many other examples there. And Indigenous people have always been a part of the armed forces, playing a key role in all of the branches, but nice to see the Rangers represented here today.
For sure. And as the march-off continues, I'm going to send things down to Ashley Burke, who's by the War Memorial and is with a guest. Ashley.
Rosie, I want to tell you about a touching moment first. A retired private, John Priest, he's the only Second World War veteran here that we could identify and see in the crowd, which is very different from past years. And at the end there, when the veterans all marched, he came down here. He's 98 years old, and he joined the back of the march and walked away. It was really a special moment to witness. That just happened. And right now, I want to introduce you to another guest. I'm with retired Colonel Alan Methvan. He served in Cyprus. It's been 60 years since that peacekeeping mission. He has watched the ceremony on TV for decades. This is his first time coming in person. For you, why did you decide to come today, and what does this moment mean to you?
We came today because I'd always wanted to come, and I'm getting older, and so it was time. So we're here with our 2 daughters. During the moment, what I think about is past family members. I knew I lost a grandfather in World War I. I didn't know until this year I lost a brother of him, and my grandson found him, and my wife and I went to Europe and visited his grave, and we're probably the first ones since he was put in it. It was very moving because rows and rows of crosses were his unit, so it must have been a bad day for that unit. But that's what I remember.
What is it like for you to look around and see the thousands of people in the crowd here to honor people like yourself who served?
I don't think they're honoring me, but it's meaningful. The sad thing is that we don't talk enough about it other than on the 11th of November, and entire generations are growing up not knowing why they're allowed to grow up in a country like ours. That's what it means to me.
Is there a moment from your time serving that you're comfortable sharing that you think about on Remembrance Day?
Yes, and people died during training as well, and it was that moment I was asked to give a driver to a guy who was attached to me. He was going on leave at the end of an exercise, and I said, certainly after my soldiers have had some sleep, because they've been up for over 48 hours going, and he found somebody else to take him. Unfortunately, they ran head-on into an American tank dozer and were all killed. I remember them. We lose people in training too. And the other thing I think we need to remember is the impact on the families back home, and the wives who were left without husbands, like my grandmother, who brought up 2 sons from babyhood, one of whom was my father.
What is your message to the next generation who's serving now, who's joining the forces now?
Those of us who went before you wanted to serve. I hope you want to serve. You couldn't be in a better place for you personally and this country. They need you now more than ever, perhaps.
Thank you, Mr. Methvan, for sharing your story and for your service. Back to you, Rosie.
Thank you, Ashley. And that gives us a moment to talk about Canada's role in Cyprus and also to show you a ceremony that took place in Cyprus. This year is the 60th anniversary of Canada's peacekeeping mission in Cyprus, which continues to this day. We'll talk about that in a moment with Tim. More than 25,000 members have served there. It's one of Canada's longest and best known overseas military commitments, and this is how it was remembered in Cyprus earlier today. And Tim, it is true that peacekeeping is something that we don't probably talk a lot about, maybe enough about, and particularly this operation, which continues to this day, which is incredible to think of.
Yes, 60 years ago, Cyprus. It was our longest serving mission, and about 30,000 Canadians have served there, including in a major shooting war in 1974 when Turkey and the Greek Cypriots fought, and Canadians were involved in that. 2 were killed, I think 17 wounded. So peacekeeping is dangerous. Yeah. And, you know, if you and I were talking 20 years ago, we'd probably be talking a lot more about peacekeeping, right? But the war in Afghanistan, I think, changed that narrative. And as you've alluded to today, the many wars around the world. Peacekeeping is still an important part of the United Nations. Canada doesn't take part in the same way as we did in the past. We may again someday, but we have our various commitments around the world. But Cyprus is one that is interesting because it unites so many veterans who had that experience from 63 to 93, and we are remembered still, I think, very fondly there by the people who we help to protect. And we heard a couple of veterans talk about that, being there, putting themselves in harm's way, and that is a difficult thing for anyone to do, but we do it very well, the members of the Canadian Armed Forces.
Is the Prime Minister just doing some glad handing before he leaves? Just listen in for a moment.
Hello. How's it coming? How's it going? Pretty good.
I met your dad many years ago on my grade 8 graduation trip.
Praise you every day.
Just bring you forward, sir. Mr. Officer.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, the Prime Minister taking a few moments to meet with people as he gets ready to depart the official ceremony. I'm not going to get into the politics here. I'll restrain myself, and I'm going to go back to Deanna Sumanak-Johnson in Waterdown, who's there with some kids, some teenagers. I shouldn't call them kids. They'd be very upset with me. Teens who are spending part of their Remembrance Day with you, Deanna.
They are, Rosie, and it's always one of the highlights of my year. We're here in front of the cenotaph in the downtown area of Waterdown, Ontario. There you can see some tanks. You can see some of the local people as well as sort of teens hanging around. They've pinned their poppies right there to the wreaths in front of the cenotaph. And we're also by the local Legion. Legion's, of course, very important to celebration and commemoration of Remembrance Day. And with me is Mr. Rob Flossman. He is a teacher here at a school that we were just at, and he's also the director of something called the Museum of Hope, which is housed inside the Legion. Students are there right now. Can you tell me about the Museum of Hope idea?
Well, it came to fruition about 12 years ago. We had students who really wanted a better experience for history and get out of the history books. And so with just a few artifacts, we started the school in a classroom. And we had 20 visitors. And every year we've built, and the students love it. They put on such a show. We were at the high school for 10 years. This is our second year at the Legion.
Because your collection got too big for the high school, right?
1,400 artifacts.
We're talking everything like from shells, helmets, postcards.
Yep, all the way from the Boer War all the way to Afghanistan and peacekeeping.
Tell me, what's your secret? The one theme that Rosie and I have been talking about and exploring today is how do you keep the significance of these conflicts, of Canada's deployment in the First and Second World War, as well as conflicts since then, to this young generation. You know, they're on their phones. Everything seems so remote, so far away in time and place. What's your secret as a teacher?
The secret is put the books down, get out the artifacts, because when you hold that artifact in your hand, it speaks volumes. And those kids put their phones down. They do a little research with the phones, put the phones down, and they immerse themselves in the history.
So amazing.
It's a
Thank
beautiful
you.
thing.
Thank you so much for that, Rob and Rosie. We will have the opportunity to go inside the Legion and check out that amazing collection where the kids are the curators, right?
Absolutely. They're the docents. And in fact, of their family and the community, they become the keepers of the history. So often it's lost, right? The young generation doesn't have time to talk to grandma. And by the time they're of age, they've lost important people in their family. This is the time, 15, 16 years old. Now they are the leaders. They're the keeper of their histories. Hey, guys.
There you go. Everyone, he's a local celebrity here, Rosie. Everyone is saying hi to him. But some tricks of the trade of a seasoned history teacher as he tries to sort of keep the flame of learning about history and preserving our history alive. Rosie.
That's great, Deanna. Thank you for that so much. And the chief historian beside me is really into it as well of the War Museum. Going to take just a moment here to pause and watch some of the people do what happens every year. They take their poppy off because you are supposed to remove your poppy at sundown on November 11th, and they leave it on the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And remind me, Tim, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier put in place in 2000.
That's right. Yeah. Brought back from France, one of our unknown soldiers near the Battle of Vimy Ridge, that titanic battle in April of 1917. And this is such a powerful moment, I think. The return of one who was lost to his country. We do not know his name. We could probably find out through DNA testing now, but we will not. And the unknown...
We will not because we've decided that that's important.
It's important.
Okay.
That's
Not
right.
to. Okay.
Yeah, and so the unknown soldier rests here, and then you have this powerful image, I think, of people laying the poppies there. Also, John McCrae's poem in Flanders Fields, the symbol of the poppy, it adopted in 1921. So many of those structures of remembrance coming from the First World War, and yet resonating forward, the past connecting to the present. And this is a ceremony, impromptu,
Yes.
it's not part of it,
No.
that has really emerged since the 2000.
And by the end of the evening, that Tomb of the Unknown Soldier will be covered in poppies, and it's quite remarkable by the end of the day. As we've been talking about, as we watch people lay their poppies there and move on, this year also marked the anniversary, the 80th anniversary of D-Day, such a remarkable moment for Canadians on the beaches of Normandy on June 6th in 1944 as they began the liberation of Western Europe. In June, there was a ceremony held. Tim was there and was part of that ceremony. Let's hear from someone who was also there, Bill Wilson.
It really started, and the sun rose. The first thing we saw was the contrails of the superforts going in to drop bombs on the landing beaches. So that would be about 4 to 5 in the morning, and the sun would continue to rise. Next thing we'd see was the barrage balloons, and lines of which indicated below those balloons were landing craft of various types. And then eventually you could see the hulls and their big lines. And I looked from where we were, almost perfect formation of all of these barges and landing craft going through the water, all heading to France. I don't think any of us had breakfast that morning. And we just stood there watching in awe. It's never been seen before in the history of man.
Bill Wilson recalling that moment that he stormed the beaches, and this is the anniversary that took place earlier this year in June with Canadian veterans, the Prime Minister, and those veterans being rolled down to the very beaches where they had arrived back in June of 1944. Just incredible moments. And I know Tim wants to talk about it because he was there too, and it was a special moment for him. But let me bring in someone who was also there, and that is George Couture, who joins us now from Calgary. He's a D-Day veteran of the Royal Winnipeg Rifle. George Couture, nice to see you this morning. How are you, sir?
Very good, thanks.
You look great. Tell me, you went to that event in Juno Beach in June. What was that like for you to be back there?
Oh, it seemed a long time ago now.
Did it bring back memories for you, Mr. Couture?
Yeah, some bad, some good.
Tell me about a good memory.
What time ago?
Did you think about the friends that you had and what you were able to do that day?
Yeah, I tried to.
You also served in the Korean War. So what does Remembrance Day mean to you? Yes, what does Remembrance Day mean to you?
Well, mostly over there was celebrating the end of the war.
Do you understand how many people appreciate what you did, sir?
I guess we all, soldiers, we took part, we did our best.
What are you doing today? What are you doing for Remembrance Day today, Mr. Couture?
Well, I've come here to the Legion. I do whatever my daughter plans. She's a very busy girl looking after me.
What has she planned for you today? Are you going to meet up with some friends and think about things?
Yeah, I'm going to have a few beers here at the Legion and go home and meet a few friends.
That sounds pretty good. You were also a prisoner of war, and you were a survivor of the death marches. Is it still
That's
painful?
Right.
Yeah, is it still painful to think about that time?
Oh, I put it aside and try to forget about it, I just remember the good times and the bad.
Yeah. How old are you now, George? May I ask you that?
Well, I guess I'm 99.
You're 99. And you turn 100 pretty soon, I think.
Yeah, pretty soon.
Pretty soon. Well, I'm going to let you go and have your beers at the Legion, but can I say to you, Mr. Couture, that we thank you for your service and all you did for us all those years ago.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for making time, and I hope you have a good day.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, George Couture, nice to meet you. Thank you so much. George Couture, a veteran of World War II, of the Korean War, a prisoner of war, 99 years old, Tim, turning 100. And I just want to pause for a moment to remark on this, because it was the same with the veterans that my producer Lisa interviewed off the top at your museum. Such humility.
Yes.
And I am stunned by that. This was their job.
Yeah.
They did what their country asked them. They never thought about where we would be all these years later and how much we would appreciate what they had done.
Yeah, that humility comes forth. Also a silence, you know, and the difficulty in talking about those times. I've often thought, I've spoken to veterans for so long, and I've spoken to the children of veterans now, and they often say, I wish I'd been able to ask my dad about something, or my granddad, or my uncle, or my mother. And I think those silences, there are a lot of reasons for that. For a long time, pain, that's right.
Yeah.
We didn't create a space to talk about such things. Now we do, and that's important, but sadly we're losing so many, or have lost already. And so now is a time on this day to reflect upon that, perhaps, and maybe some of the people watching will have an opportunity to have that conversation with someone in their life, a neighbor perhaps, someone they've known who's a veteran, and to try to hear those stories, because I think it's the stories that matter and resonate so deeply with all of us.
And we can talk more about how you're preserving some of those stories. Just an honor to talk to someone like George Couture. Let me go down to David Thurton, because you see the gates opening and now people making their way onto the National War Memorial by the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. David.
So maybe don't go, okay. To us.
David, I think you're with someone, are you?
Yes, Rosie, we're kind of just sorting out the situation here where I'm with a couple of men who served in, the Army, in the Navy, in the Royal Canadian Air Force. And maybe we could just start walking, because they're opening up the gates here. That's part of the situation that we were trying to manage, trying to talk to guests, but also try to talk to some folks who are doing the thing that you do at this moment, which is to lay a poppy on the tomb, which is like one of my favorite moments. So let's bring in some folks here. Gonna get back here. You, sir, tell me your name.
My name's Corporal Rodriguez, or Paul Rodriguez, when he's first and last name.
And let's keep on walking. I want to make sure that you don't miss out on this moment.
I appreciate it.
And tell me about all your buds who are with you right now.
So we're part of the Sentry program. We were guarding the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier for about a month, and we grabbed different elements and soldiers from different elements and trades. So myself, I'm a crewman. I'm with LDSH back in Edmonton, Alberta. We have a bunch of guys that are with the Navy from the West Coast, a lot of Air Force. So we came from all over Canada. We wanted to grab select individuals from different trades just to make sure that we represent the CAF in its entirety.
We'll let you come through the gates here and maybe just catch us on the other side. I want to make sure that my cameraman, Rosie Matthew, is safe and he doesn't bump into anything. So you were just hearing there, Rosie, that they're part of the Sentry program. Basically, the officers who would stand in front of the memorial on the cenotaph on guard. So where's Rodriguez? Okay, you made it through the gates. Okay, let's keep on walking. And so I guess I just had some questions about, the work, this program that you did, right? What's it like to do that, especially this year, because this is the 10th anniversary of the death of Corporal Nathan Searle?
Yes, so it's a big honor. For most of us, it's our first time. A lot of guys haven't even been to Ottawa, so to be on this tomb and represent the CAF in such a way, it's an immense honor. This year, like you said, being the 10th anniversary of that tragic day, it just makes us that much more, have that much more honor to stand up there. We've been doing this for about a month now, and I can say that all the guys that I've done it with, they have immense pride that they're going to take back to their units, and know for sure that I hope that we got to talk to a lot of the people of Ottawa and Canada and say that this monument is of great importance, and we're very happy that we got to be here and be a part of something like that.
What are you thinking about when you're standing on guard?
You try to distract yourself, make the time go by faster, but always you have to just make sure that you're looking professional. You're not moving around too much. apart from the patrols that you do. But you try to make the time go by. We have our roamer that's up there as well that kind of gives us a heads up on like when we're going to get swapped out. So you kind of just wait for that to happen and try not to look around too much. So it's a lot of patient waiting. But again, it's at the end of the day something that we love to do, and it's a very honorable thing.
Rosie, how are you doing for time? Can I bring in one more guest? I hope I
Sure
can.
can.
I'm just going to bring in
Yep.
Corporal Clifford here. He's with the Royal Canadian Armed Forces. I guess the first question I have to ask you is, like, you know, you're celebrating your centenary, your 100th anniversary. What's that like? What are you thinking about on this day?
Thinking about just the fact that, like, the Air Force has been going for 100 years. I've been in for 10 of that there's been so much history and everything with the Air Force, even before my involvement, and of how much more there's going to be with the Air Force even after my time with them. So it's been very humbling and great to see that I've been a small part in a much bigger organization, and that even now, like after I'm done with my time in the Air Force, that it's going to keep going and be such a powerful and important organization in the armed forces.
You're a pretty young guy. What do you want to say to other young people who might be considering possibly doing what you're doing? Might be on the fence, might be thinking, is this for me?
If you want the opportunity to serve your country, get the chance to adventure and go places you would never thought you would have had the chance to go before, the Air Force could be a real good way to do that. I've had the chance to go to the Arctic Circle. I've had the chance to go to the Sahara Desert. Things that I never thought I would have done prior to joining.
You know what, Corporal Clifford, also Corporal DeCavallo, thank you so much for your service. Thank you so much for speaking with you. We'll let you lay that poppy on the tomb, you know, that moment that is so precious to you and so many people who come here. Rosie, I'll send it back to you.
Thanks, David. I appreciate that. I especially appreciate that because, of course, as David mentioned, it is also the 10th anniversary of the Parliament Hills shooting, which included the murder of Nathan Cirillo, who was one of the sentries right there at that war memorial on that day 10 years ago. Hard to believe. And you can see people still laying their poppies down there at the tomb, and that will continue as hundreds and hundreds of people make their way up off the streets. Look at that incredible turnout here today for this Remembrance Day. And Ashley Burke is still down there and trying to talk to people about what they're doing and what they're thinking about today. Ashley.
Rosemary, I'm with Agatha Dyer. Her son, Ainsworth Dyer, was just 24 when he died in Afghanistan. She was honored here 20 years ago as a Silver Cross Mother. It is her first time back. She's pinned on her medal today. What does it mean to you to be here?
It meant so much to me to be here today. It's an honor to be here.
If you're
and it brings back a lot of memories.
If you're comfortable sharing, can you tell me about how your son passed away?
Okay, he was in Afghanistan, and the American soldiers, pilot dropped the bombs on the Canadian soldiers. 4 of the boys were gone. That's how he died, at friendly fire.
I'm very sorry. It's been 10 years since the Canadian forces pulled out of Afghanistan, and there's people questioning right now, was it worth it? Especially when you see the Taliban, since taking power since 2021, there's a humanitarian crisis, they're tightening their grip on women's rights. Was it worth it?
It didn't worth it, no. No, not at all. You lost your life for nothing. Because there's no changes.
What is your message to Canadians?
My message to Canadians is just don't go into militaries.
It's been you talked about how hard it's been for you over the years.
Yes, it's very hard. It's very hard when you lose your loved one. It can be harder when you lost a child.
During that 2 minutes of a moment of silence, what do you think about?
I was just thinking about Ainsworth. Oh, what man he would become, have children, get married. He was engaged to get married and all this stuff, And to be with him, he came for visit, and to be with him, You know, I could see him, and now he's gone.
What do you want Canadians to know about your son today?
My son was a gentle giant. He was so loving. He loved my food. He loved the alcohol. And Mom, what are you cooking today? I said, rice and peas and chicken. And he would say, oh, I'm coming over, I'm coming. He was living in Edmonton.
Well, thank you for sharing your story and your son's stories with us today, and for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And my friend Kathy, she's the one who invited me down here today.
Thank you too.
Yes. I hope I am good.
Thank you for that, Ashley. Nice to see people come out again to support their friends and to want to be here in particular on this day. I have never seen this many people gathering around. This is a wholly spontaneous act, we should say. Nothing that was ever planned, but this is something that has become important to many people to mark the end of this day. And as we've been talking about, this day, this year, also marks the 10-year anniversary since the end of Canada's mission in Afghanistan. I want to take you back to that moment in 2014 when the Canadian flag was lowered in Afghanistan, which marked the end of our time there. It was a difficult mission for so many. 40,000 or so Canadian Armed Forces spent time in that fairly brutal war, let's be honest. 158 soldiers lost their lives there. But the impact, the effects of what happened in Afghanistan after Canada's departure continue to be felt by Canadian Armed Forces members and many of their family members. Even to this day. We've talked a little bit about PTSD and how that impacted people. But that was that moment back in March of 2014. The 10-year anniversary of the end of the mission was marked very quietly at the beginning of this year, and my colleague Murray Brewster wrote about it at the time. But I want to bring in someone who was there for that moment, retired Major General Dean Milner. Retired General Milner, nice to meet you, sir. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome, and good to talk to you, Rosemary.
Good to talk to you. You're out in Petawawa today, and I wonder, maybe let's start with how you reflect on that end of that mission and the sacrifices made by Canadian soldiers in Afghanistan.
Well, to start with, Rosemary, today is a significant day for us to remember those that fought for freedom, fought for the world to be a better place, the different wars, and also, as you've mentioned, Afghanistan. So I'm here in Petawawa, home of the 2nd Canadian Mechanized Brigade Group, amongst a whole bunch of other soldiers that deployed to Afghanistan, and also families, some families of the fallen. So today is a significant day to remember those that sacrificed, again, for our freedom.
I was saying to Tim Cook earlier, retired Major General, that it seems incredible that it was 10 years ago, and I'm sure for you that is even more the case. And I know that your perspective on that conflict has really changed and evolved. Can you tell me how?
Well, I mean, I will always remember that mission. As you know, Canadians spent 12, 13 years fighting with a NATO force to try and get rid of Al-Qaeda and terrorist capabilities, and to help the Afghans to build that country, to make it safer. And you know, when somebody asked me if it was worth it, it's a tough question, because we didn't win, as you know, in the end. But having said that, you know, we made lives better for so many for so long in Afghanistan. We did get rid of Al-Qaeda. We did get rid of international terrorists. And, you know, we built roads and schools and infrastructure. And, you know, I went back there in 2018 to spend time with Afghans. And the Afghans will tell you, thank you to Canada. You know, we fought as a force. And, you know, it is tough. You know, we did lose sacrifice. We sacrificed 158. And losing one soldier is tough. But, you know, again, we did a lot for that country.
You talked about the sacrifice and of course the fact that the war was not won. And many people look at Afghanistan now and are very disappointed to see where it has ended up. I wonder how you reconcile the sacrifices you personally made with the state of that country now.
Well, it is difficult. There's no doubt. I think Canada, honestly, we left too early. We left in 2014. We were the second largest training mission at the time, building up the Afghan police force and army forces. And I would like to have seen us carry on. It was a difficult, difficult war to win, but yeah, it is tough to look back and see where that country is now. But having said that, it's a lot better off than when we were there to start. Again, there is no terrorism. The Al-Qaeda's gone, and so that's what we have to remember.
Sure.
And a lot of the Afghans are a lot better off, but I personally would like to have seen Canada to stay longer.
Other than your own service, Major General, which was so important, and we thank you for it, is there someone that you think about today, a person in particular that meant a lot to you or that sacrificed an awful lot?
Well, I think of all the soldiers and the families, and there's a lot of. I talked to a family today, the Greenfields, who lost their son in Afghanistan, and there's a number of the families that I keep in touch with, and it is always tough when you lose one soldier in combat. That's tough. So we do remember. I can also tell you that we just celebrated Lily Fontaine with our dragoons. So I think of our dragoons that were killed over in Afghanistan. And I actually spent today, Remembrance Day, not only with 2 Brigade, but I spent it with my son, who's now serving in the forces, and my dad, who also served 38 years in the forces.
Wow. Families like this, Major General, really impress me. I thank you for your service, as does all of Canada. Thank you for speaking with me today about Afghanistan and some of your memories. Really appreciate you being here, sir.
Thank you very much. A great day to remember. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Tim Cook, I'll bring you in here before I go to the next guest. But again, this family dedication to military service. But let's talk a little bit about Afghanistan, because Major General Milner obviously has sort of mixed feelings about it, rightly so.
Yeah.
Handed things off at a time when he didn't think it was the right moment, would have wished Canada had done more, and yet many Canadians at the time felt like we had done enough and that we needed to move on.
Yeah, it's a strange war insofar as we lost it, at least as it unfolded in 2021. I think many Canadians, though, who served there over the various rotations, as you said, 40,000, they see it in multiple ways. And there's no single narrative about that war. Those who may have served in 2006 and hard fighting see it very differently than those who may have been on a training mission in 2014 or those who were there in 2002. So different perceptions. One thing I have heard consistently, though, is that when Afghanistan fell, we had a duty to get out those Afghans who helped us, the translators, the fixers, the women who fought for rights. And there's some deep hurt still about that we didn't move fast enough, and that we still have a debt to those people. And I think that's something that I know many former members of the Canadian Armed Forces feel very strongly about, that we have to continue to get those people out. Some are in Pakistan, as you know, some are in other countries. There's a threat of being sent back to Afghanistan. I think the obligations of war and the legacy of war, it never ends with the armistice. It never ends with the victory or the defeat. It goes on for years and sometimes decades.
Yeah, how interesting. Thank you for that. We've been talking through the day a little bit about post-traumatic stress disorder, particularly because today the Silver Cross mother who represents her family, Maureen Anderson, both of her sons went to Afghanistan, came back, and then had to deal with a new conflict, a mental health conflict of their own, and that was because of PTSD. And Stéphane Grenier is is himself a retired lieutenant colonel, but also now the CEO of Mental Health Innovations, and has spent much of his life now dedicated to talking about mental health and finding ways for veterans to deal with this. Stéphane Grenier, thank you for making the time today.
Thank you very much for having me.
As a veteran who has experienced PTSD and also tried to find ways to help the military deal with this issue, what do you think is the biggest sort of challenge facing particularly Afghan veterans right now, given, as I said, the fact that Silver Cross family is really representing that this year?
I think the big challenge for any veteran is to bring meaning to what happened to them while they were serving overseas, be it in Afghanistan or any mission abroad. And as I was listening to the interviews prior to mine, I keep hearing the word defeat, and I would hate to see the world today and what it would have become if the Afghanistan campaign had not happened. Right. And as veterans, as people who have served our country, and of course Afghanistan, arguably can be seen as a defeat. But again, I reframe that because I wonder what the world would look like today. And so you have hundreds and thousands of veterans today trying to bring meaning and trying to justify in what is a very tormenting sort of life after wars and after these types of missions, when you're trying to bring meaning to all of this, and it's very morally conflicting, and that moral conflict is part of the mental health challenges that many veterans have.
For sure, and I appreciate that reframing. I'm sure some of the people listening will as well. Where are we in our understanding of PTSD, Lieutenant Colonel, and how to treat it, would you say?
Well, first of all, about 24 years ago, I coined a term called operational stress injury, and my attempt there inside the military culture and the veteran culture was to move away from very stigmatizing terminology. Imagine you're a soldier and you're told you have a disorder. So reframing the language, and we still to this date, the American Psychiatric Association is constantly toying with these ideas of reframing things. Now you're going to say, is a term that important? Well, it is, because I think our understanding of what causes soldiers to return home and struggle with life, struggle with everyday mundane things, is greatly understood. And we are, in our North American modern society, we sort of obsessed with the one diagnosis, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, while we do know there are so many other conditions that people will develop over time. And I think we're doing a disservice to some degree, even law enforcement in this country. They're very focused on PTSD, when in fact we know the vast majority of people don't necessarily struggle with the actual traumas of war, but what they have witnessed and what really did not sit well, which I constantly reframe as that moral conflict. And we do know now that Canadian researchers are researching the future of how we treat veterans based on a new paradigm of understanding that moral dilemma that people have, either by what they were asked to do or what they were asked not to do in these conflict zones.
And tell me what you think is the best way. I understand that you would like models built around peer-to-peer counseling, because that's the only people that would understand any of this would be veterans themselves.
Right, and the counseling, I'd like to reframe that as well. The peer support happens between those medical counseling sessions, if you wish. And as I've said, as I wrote in my book, actually, my 4 close calls with suicide were never in my doctor's office. Wow. And so many veterans struggle alone, struggle thinking they're the only ones on the planet going through this. So between those medical appointments, if a veteran feels alone and they have no one to actually connect with, not for a pity party or not to reminisce necessarily, but just to feel understood in the everyday cycle of life, is extremely important, which is where peer support really comes in. And by the way, this is not just for veterans, it's for every Canadian.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Stéphane Grenier, thank you so much for bringing us this perspective. Really important to talk about it, and appreciate your time today, sir.
Most welcome.
If you or someone you know is struggling with a mental health crisis, help is available. You can call or text 988, available in French and English 24 hours a day. Deanna Sumanek-Johnson, a quick final thought from you on this day.
Rosie, we're here at the Museum of Hope. This is a student-curated museum of historical artifacts of Canada's wars and foreign deployments. And one resounding lesson for me today has been that if you get students engaged in hands-on learning, really getting them to experience the real bits of history rather than just reading textbooks, they will be engaged, even if they are, in fact, born almost 100 years after the start of the Great War. Rosie.
Johnson, thank you. Thank you for being here today. David Thurton, a quick last word from you, please.
Yes, certainly, Rosie. War certainly reveals our humanity. And during this ceremony, we saw expressions of that humanity, whether it's a tear, whether it's a gentle touch, or, someone forgetting their puppy and someone sharing it with them. We saw some of that. They're inspiring moments, and I won't forget them.
Ashley?
I'm personally struck by the changing face of this ceremony. So few Second World War veterans able to come here now in person. I'm thinking in particular of Elsa Lessard. She's 102 now. She was one of the listeners, the women who decoded messages during the Second World War that helped German messages help potentially shorten the war and save lives. And she faithfully has come until her mid-90s and marched with the veterans. This year she was hoping to make it down. We didn't see her, but I'm thinking of her and the others that served and how honored we are to hear their stories and how important it is that history lives on and we keep telling those stories before it's too late.
And thank you to you and David Thurton for helping us tell those stories today. Ashley, appreciate it very much. Tim Cook, I'll get a final last word from you on this day.
I wonder what is the debt today? And we've been talking about history, we've been talking about people. There is a debt in my mind, and it's a debt of remembrance. It's a debt of understanding. It's a debt of engaging with the past, but trying to bring it forward to the present. And I want to thank you, Rosie, for the great role you have done and for having me on the show.
Thank you for always being here. I learn so much every year, as you know, and we appreciate you and your time and everything you're doing with your books and at the War Museum to help us all preserve these memories that are so needed on this day. We hope today that you have spent some time thinking about conflicts past and present, people you know who have served or continue to serve, and the sacrifices these people have made for our country, for our democracy, and for freedom. We give the final word of this Remembrance Day to veterans who served our country. They get the final word, as they should. Thank you on behalf of myself and the whole CBC News team. Thank you so much for watching this Remembrance Day.
I hope Canadians think about the sheer magnitude of people that we lost. Also, there's a lot of veterans that returned, and they were not in good shape, whether they had horrific injuries or mental disabilities.
The world is becoming much more dangerous. We see that in so many ways, in Ukraine and in the Middle East and even in our own backyard. One of the things that I think Canadians do need to reflect upon when we talk about remembrance is not only remembering those who have come before us, but kind of re-steeling ourselves here too to the fact that security of our country is important and we need to pay attention to it.
Everybody should wear a poppy. Everybody to think peace. Why we have peace? Because of all these people.
Our whole crew, to me, were the best of the kind. Everyone was perfect in what he did. And I think that's what brought us all through. And they're all gone now. I'm all left. Just me. But I have all the crew's children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I try to look after them all. And I hope sometime they'll remember me.